My name is Julia, a person known for her 99% seriousness. Yet here I am, standing outside my home, accompanied only by a solitary suitcase, hastily packed with my bare essentials. Clutched tightly in my hand are two ominous envelopes. It was on the cusp of early summer, the most enchanting season of the year, when I found myself abruptly ousted from my in-laws' residence. There was no forewarning, no hint of the impending storm. Enticed by the delightful aroma drifting from the kitchen, I completed my usual morning routine and descended the stairs, eager for breakfast. The tantalizing scent promised a feast, typical of my housemate's culinary prowess. Today, it seemed, breakfast was served American style. Brimming with anticipation, I pushed open the living room door, only to be greeted not by a sumptuous meal, but by an unexpected confrontation. "Julia, you deceived us," my mother-in-law's accusing voice pierced the air as tears welled in her eyes. Her words, laden with betrayal, echoed incoherently, accusing me of treachery and shattered trust. After delivering her accusations, my mother-in-law departed, leaving behind a lingering glare heavy with resentment. Meanwhile, my father-in-law remained, his gaze burning with simmering fury. "What's going on?" It was all I could muster, my confusion mounting. I couldn't fathom why my in-laws were suddenly treating me with such hostility. Just yesterday, we were on amicable terms, much like with my own parents. As I grappled with their inexplicable behavior, my husband Ryan, who had been silently consuming his breakfast, caught my eye. "Last night," he began, explaining that he had opted to spend the night at our other residence near his workplace, leading me to believe he wouldn't be present this morning. Had he returned home late last night? Desperate for clarity, I rushed to Ryan, seeking his assistance. "What's wrong with Mom and Dad?" My words caught in my throat just as I was about to utter, "They're behaving." But my attention shifted abruptly to Ryan, whose demeanor had taken a chilling turn. His gaze pierced through me, laden with accusation and contempt, a far cry from the warmth and kindness I was accustomed to. "Ryan, how could you?" The words spilled from his lips, dripping with venom. Gone was the gentle melody of his usual speech, replaced by a harshness I had never encountered before. This was the same Ryan who would surprise me with my favorite flowers whenever his work kept us apart. "I'm sorry. I truly wish we could still travel together," he continued, his words a stark departure from the sentiments he had expressed just a week prior. With a gesture to his secretary, who stood nearby, he signaled for action. "Take care of it," he instructed, the command delivered with an air of finality. "You've finally done it, Julia, haven't you?" His accusation hung heavy in the air, stabbing at my core. "Married me for the money, didn't you?" "What? You've taken my mother's money," I protested, disbelief lacing my words. "Wait, that's not true." The accusation hung heavy in the air, the enormity of the alleged sum sinking in. "And now you're trying to justify it." My father-in-law's voice was laced with scorn. "What? What on earth are you talking about, Dad? I swear, I didn't touch a penny of her money. Get out of this house." "Dad, what's happening?" I pleaded desperately for clarity, but received only a curt denial in response. It seemed I was being accused of embezzling a significant amount from my mother-in-law, a notion utterly unfounded in reality. I begged for understanding, for someone to believe me, but my pleas fell on deaf ears. A chill ran down my spine as the secretary reappeared, clutching a suitcase, likely containing my belongings. "Please, Ryan, listen to me," I implored, but he shook his head with a disappointed expression, as though delivering lines in a tragic play. He was convinced of my guilt. "These are the divorce papers," he stated matter-of-factly, thrusting them towards me. "Once you've signed them, send them back to me." "What? Why?" I exclaimed, my voice trembling with disbelief. "I can't live with someone solely interested in a family inheritance. It's the family's decision." Ryan's words cut through the air like icicles, sending shivers down my spine. "Now, leave." "It's not fair. I haven't done anything," I protested vehemently, but my pleas fell on deaf ears. Ryan's demeanor remained stoic as he commanded his secretary, "Ensure she never returns to this property." "What? What's happening?" "Stop." I struggled against the secretary's firm grip as he forcibly escorted me out, my suitcase in tow. Tears streamed down my face, mingling with the tumult of emotions swirling within me. Coming from humble beginnings, I knew the allure of wealth, but I was never one to resort to deceit. The grandeur of the mansion felt like a cruel contrast as I was unceremoniously ejected onto the street, barely half an hour after waking. Was this a nightmare? My mind raced, struggling to comprehend the surreal turn of events. Amidst the chaos, the imposing door slammed shut mercilessly. Just before it sealed me off completely, the secretary thrust another envelope into my hand, a final act of cruelty. "This is also from Mr. Ryan. Please take it." The secretary's voice broke through the tense silence. With a finality that matched the closing of the door, the lock clicked shut, sealing my fate. With trembling hands, I peered into the envelope, my heart sinking as I beheld its contents: a severance payment of $10,000. I had married Ryan 3 years prior, finding employment as an advisory accountant at the company where my father-in-law held the reins as CEO. Despite just passing my CPA exam, I was relegated to a subordinate role, more of an assistant to my colleagues out of pity. Then, one fateful day, everything changed. The pieces of the puzzle began to align in a way that didn't make sense. Something was amiss. Driven by a desire to prove myself as a competent CPA, I had delved into a task assigned to a colleague, only to uncover a web of deceit. My colleague had been manipulating the books, siphoning off hundreds of thousands of dollars. In that moment, a mixture of exhilaration and dread coursed through me. Yet I knew I couldn't turn a blind eye to such wrongdoing. Summoning my courage, I made the difficult decision to report the fraud to my father-in-law, the CEO. As someone deeply committed to honesty and integrity, turning a blind eye was never an option for me. Though the thought of reporting the fraud to the IRS crossed my mind, I hesitated. After all, such a drastic action would strip my colleague of their CPA status, a consequence I found difficult to reconcile with, especially after my own hard-won journey to becoming a CPA. My father-in-law, a shrewd businessman who had amassed a considerable fortune in a single generation, had been unwittingly targeted. "Thank you, Julia. We're indebted to you. Without your intervention, who knows how long they would have continued siphoning off funds." My father-in-law expressed his gratitude, his wife echoing his sentiments. I found myself celebrated as a hero, as if I had single-handedly saved the day. "Julia, if you're not involved with anyone at the moment, would you consider marrying our son?" The proposition caught me off guard, and I couldn't help but wonder if such flattery was commonplace among the wealthy. Though I laughed it off at the time, little did I know that my father-in-law's suggestion held genuine weight. Before I knew it, I found myself being introduced to their son, a man who praised me for safeguarding the family's assets. Bathed in their praise, I couldn't help but feel a sense of validation. After years of being criticized for my seriousness, it seemed that living authentically and earnestly had finally paid off. And in that moment, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of happiness. As a trainee CPA, I had never imagined ascending to the role of official advisory accountant, let alone being appointed as personal secretary to Ryan, the CEO's son. Ryan embodied the archetype of privilege, perpetually optimistic with a laissez-faire attitude that initially grated on my meticulous nature. Yet, amidst his dependency on me, I discovered a sense of fulfillment in aiding him. "Ryan, you really need to leave for the business meeting soon," I reminded him, checking my watch. "I'll manage just fine. You should get going." "Are you sure you won't stress out the driver this time?" he teased, flashing a charming smile. "I've got everything under control," I assured him, ushering him towards the door. Perhaps he appreciated my attention to detail more than I had realized. Our relationship evolved from professional to romantic, much to the delight of my father-in-law, who had harbored hopes of our union. The wedding was met with resounding approval, and for 3 years, the dynamics between Ryan, myself, and my in-laws remained largely unchanged. The most significant shift came with my father-in-law's decision to pass the company's reins to Ryan. As preparations for his ascent to the boardroom accelerated, my mother-in-law and I found ourselves immersed in a whirlwind of meetings and social engagements. Tonight was meant to be no exception, with a business partner's anniversary party on the agenda. Instead, I found myself alone in a sterile hotel room, a stark departure from the anticipated festivities. In the heat of anger and frustration, the thought of retreating to my parents' home briefly crossed my mind. But the notion didn't sit right with me. If Ryan wanted a divorce, so be it. But as someone who prides herself on honesty and sincerity, leaving under a cloud of suspicion was unthinkable. Seated on the bed, I revisited the contents of the envelope, divorce papers, and a severance payment. Despite the wave of emotions threatening to overwhelm me, I fought to maintain composure. I needed clarity. With a steadying breath, I closed my eyes and reaffirmed to myself, I haven't taken a penny of my mother-in-law's money. That's a fact. If not me, then who? The rush of excitement and fear surged once more. Gathering the bundle of $10,000, I resolved to make good use of it. After a quick touch-up of my makeup, I made my way to the private detective's office. A week later, my phone rang. We have the results of the investigation. I arrived at the office greeted by a stack of papers on the reception table. The report, thicker than anticipated, sent a shiver down my spine as I flipped through its contents, my hands trembling with anticipation. What? Ha! Each revelation in the report left me reeling, my head spinning as I absorbed the shocking truth. Exiting the building, I was greeted by an unpleasantly brisk breeze, a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling within me. Collapsing beneath the shade of a nearby street tree, I grappled with the weight of the newfound knowledge. Passers-by cast curious glances my way, oblivious to the internal battle raging within me. With resolve coursing through my veins, I made my way to my in-laws' home, determined to confront them. Why was she allowed inside? My father-in-law demanded, his voice laced with disdain as he berated the maid. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward, presenting the signed divorce papers. I've brought these, I stated firmly. You instructed me to mail them. If you seek a divorce, I won't stand in your way. But I refuse to be labeled a thief, I continued, my voice unwavering. Snatching the papers from my grasp, my father-in-law turned to leave. But I refused to let him go without a final declaration. I demand an apology from all of you, I asserted, my words echoing through the room. If you're unwilling to acknowledge your wrongdoing, I'm prepared to pursue this matter in court. As the prospect of legal action loomed, my father-in-law halted in his tracks. I was pleased when you accepted me, despite my humble background. I held genuine affection for you and your mother-in-law, he confessed, his voice tinged with remorse. Summoning my courage, I drew in a deep breath, my fists clenched at my sides. Then, with a measured exhale, I spoke. I'm telling you, I'm innocent. Do you understand? Let me be clear. I didn't do anything, I reiterated, striving to maintain composure. What? What do you mean? I didn't. My mother-in-law's voice, seemingly emerging from the shadows, pierced the tense atmosphere with confusion etched across her features. I mean exactly what I said, I affirmed, extracting the investigation report from my bag and passing it to her. Please take a look. What? What's this? What's going on? Their eyes widened as they devoured the contents of the report, their expressions teetering on the brink of disbelief. The person responsible for stealing my mother-in-law's money, it was Ryan, I revealed, the weight of the truth heavy in my words. Before our marriage, Ryan had developed a reckless habit of overspending. He used to justify it by saying, we have enough family wealth to live extravagantly for a lifetime. He indulged in frequent trips abroad, particularly enjoying gambling, often wagering hundreds of thousands of dollars at a time. Even his own parents had grown increasingly concerned, implementing measures to curb his access to their funds. They admonished Ryan, urging him to earn his own income. However, old habits die hard, and Ryan, consumed by his penchant for extravagance, sought out alternative means to sustain his lifestyle. That's when he concocted the embezzlement scheme that I ultimately uncovered. Ryan had manipulated my former colleague, who served as my father-in-law's accounting consultant, into falsifying the books. Mistakenly attributing the embezzlement solely to my former colleague, I reported it to my father-in-law without probing deeper, never uncovering the true mastermind. In reality, all the embezzled funds were lining Ryan's pockets. When the truth about my former colleague's embezzlement came to light, Ryan and his parents expressed gratitude towards me, but beneath their facade of appreciation, I sensed a simmering resentment. Was there a romantic involvement between the accountant and Ryan? It seems more like an affair, doesn't it? After all, she was married at the time, someone speculated. Nevertheless, Ryan professed his love for her, convincing her to embezzle funds for their future together. Another voice chimed in. As a consequence of her actions, my former colleague was terminated from her position and faced divorce from her husband, who had reached his breaking point. Despite obediently complying with Ryan's selfish request to keep his involvement under wraps, he ultimately wedded me. His persuasion tactic was clear: distract his parents by marrying a financially prudent partner like myself, thereby easing their suspicions and enabling him to continue his scheming. And indeed, his plan unfolded seamlessly. With my reputation for uncovering discrepancies, my in-laws relaxed their vigilance regarding Ryan's extravagant spending, simply because I was his wife. "Mother-in-law, why did you believe I stole your money?" I questioned, my voice tinged with disbelief. "Ryan told me he entrusted you with my card, Julia," she confessed, avoiding my gaze. I felt a pang of betrayal as her words sank in. "Ryan, he's been taking his responsibilities seriously lately, and I thought there might be occasions where it wouldn't be convenient to pay in cash, so I allowed him to carry my credit card. But then he said, I mustn't use it recklessly, so we'll have Julia manage it. And so, I..." Her voice trailed off, her expression clouded with regret. "So, because of that, I was accused of theft," I interjected bitterly. Just to clarify, Ryan never mentioned any of this to me. Caught off guard by the realization of her son's deception, my mother-in-law's features fell slack with disbelief. "By the way, mother-in-law, have you read about what your stolen money was used for?" I pressed, seeking to redirect the conversation. I don't understand anything anymore," she admitted, her voice laden with confusion and distress. My mother-in-law's voice trembled, barely audible over the weight of her emotions as tears welled up in her eyes. I returned the report to them, bracing myself for their reaction. "The purchase of a condominium," my mother-in-law murmured, her voice laden with disbelief. "Let me see that," my father-in-law interjected, his brows furrowed in confusion. "But Ryan already has another house near his office. Why would he buy a condo for the senior accountant?" It's becoming clear now. Ryan has been entangled with her all along. Lately, he's been spending an unusual amount of time at the other house, likely staying with her. Ryan has always been with that woman. He loved her more than he ever loved me, Julia, my mother-in-law confessed, her words heavy with heartbreak. I remained composed, devoid of emotion, having already processed the nauseating contents of the report countless times before this moment. It appears Ryan has been indulging in quite the affair with the senior accountant. They even frequent underground casinos, I added matter-of-factly. "Underground casinos? Please take a look at the last page," my mother-in-law urged, a glimmer of hope flickering in her eyes. My father-in-law frantically flipped through the pages of the report, his brows furrowed in concern. "What's this staggering amount?" he exclaimed, his voice tinged with disbelief. "He's deeply involved with the underground casino. It seems he'll be grappling with debt for the foreseeable future," I explained solemnly. "Underground casino." My father-in-law's voice trailed off as he sank to the floor, overcome with shock. "Just to be certain, none of our other cards have been compromised, correct?" I inquired, prompting my father-in-law into action. "Ha!" His eyes widened in realization as he rushed to the nearest telephone, panic evident in his movements. "Stop everything. Cancel that card immediately." His urgent command reverberated throughout the house. Later, I received a formal apology from my in-laws. They expressed regret for concealing their son's extravagant spending and his affair. While I appreciated their honesty, I couldn't help but feel a pang of disappointment. Their apology seemed incomplete without addressing the hurt they caused me. Nevertheless, I handed them the completed divorce papers. With a small nod, I began to gather my belongings, ready to leave. But as they pleaded for me to stay, their sudden change in demeanor caught me off guard. Just a week ago, they had treated me like a criminal. "I'm sorry, but isn't it a bit late for that?" I interrupted, my voice tinged with frustration. "I loved you both and considered you family, but you disregarded my feelings and opinions. Do you have any idea how hurtful that was for me?" Despite my efforts to remain composed, a solitary tear betrayed my emotions, quickly followed by a cascade of tears streaming down my cheeks. "Julia." The divorce papers lay before us, a stark reminder of the irreparable rift between us. "This divorce is what your son desires. Shouldn't we respect his wishes?" It was evident that he had moved on with someone else. After composing myself and injecting a final touch of sarcasm, an abrupt alarm pierced the silence, jolting us all. Startled by the sudden noise, I furrowed my brow in confusion, only to have my father-in-law grasp my wrist urgently. "Hey, what's going on? What are you doing?" I questioned, taken aback by his sudden urgency. "You should come too, honey," he insisted, leading me outside to the garden. There, the gate that had shut me out just a week ago stood before us, and we heard a voice from the other side. "Hey, the gate won't open. Is anyone home?" Ryan's frustrated voice echoed through the gate, followed by the sound of him banging on it vigorously. What's happening? My car won't start either. This is ridiculous. Ryan's frustration was palpable as the annoying alarm persisted, refusing to cease its blaring. Listen closely, Ryan, my father-in-law began, his tone firm and unwavering. Huh? Dad, can you hear me? My key isn't working. Can you unlock it from your side? Ryan's voice crackled through the intercom, tinged with confusion. I told you to listen, Ryan, my father-in-law's voice boomed over the intercom. What? What's going on? Ryan's tone faltered, sensing the shift in his father's demeanor. You have no right to open this gate, my father-in-law declared firmly. What? Why would you say that? Ryan's voice rose in disbelief. Isn't it obvious? I didn't think you could be so oblivious. We're aware of everything. All of it, my father-in-law continued, his voice unwavering. Is Mom there too? Ryan's voice trembled with uncertainty. Ryan, Julia meant the world to us. But you're a different story. We want nothing to do with you ever again, my father-in-law declared resolutely. What? What's happening? Mom, are you there? Please say something, Ryan pleaded desperately. We know that you framed Julia. We know about the embezzlement. We know about your affair and your debts. We know everything, my father-in-law stated, his voice filled with conviction. Wait a minute. Where did you get such absurd ideas? Stop spreading lies. Ryan's voice cracked with indignation. Ryan's frantic protests continued, but to no avail. Anxiety gnawed at me as I wondered if his parents would be swayed by his words and doubt me once again. However, my fears were unfounded. I trust Julia. So do I, Dad, his mother interjected firmly. Mom, Ryan's voice wavered, betraying his disbelief. We sincerely apologize. Julia, would you please consider taking my position? His father implored. What? Hey, is Julia there too? Ryan's voice erupted in anger, reverberating through the air. He seemed to be causing quite a commotion. However, his resistance was short-lived as security personnel arrived to calm him down. In the end, I agreed to my father-in-law's proposal, but with one condition: I will always be honest. Can you trust me unconditionally? They both nodded solemnly. A year later. Do you really think I'm cut out for this executive role? I hesitated, lingering in front of the executive office door. My father-in-law gave me a reassuring pat on the shoulder. Despite my divorce from Ryan, I still addressed the CEO as Dad, as we had mutually agreed upon. Julia, what our company truly needs is someone with your integrity and sincerity. It's a perfect fit for you, don't you think? He offered, his smile warm and encouraging. However, I couldn't resist a slightly mischievous question. Do you ever regret letting Ryan go? He should be the one stepping into this role, shouldn't he? Since the incident, my in-laws had distanced themselves from Ryan. Initially, he would often come pleading for financial assistance, but once he realized they wouldn't comply, he stopped. The son who had vanished under the weight of enormous debt. I wondered if he was still with that senior. Ryan let out a small, lonely sigh, but Ryan isn't the one meant for this position. The responsibility was too much for him. We're the ones to blame for indulging him too much, my father-in-law admitted. Dad, I murmured sympathetically. Hey, don't look so disheartened. Stand tall and proud, he encouraged. Yes, I replied with newfound determination, reaching for the handle of the executive office door. As it swung open effortlessly, I stepped inside, ready to embrace my new role.
All right, everyone's presentations are done, Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the ninth grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry." Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next." Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. "If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you." I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hope to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.